I prepared a topic for today and went through it all and thought I had it complete, and then got into some conversation with guidance and found out that my topic wasn't quite complete as I thought. And I thought it should be, because it was a very simple topic. It was the eternal process of, what was it? Eternal process of evolution and awakening, or something like that. Of
That
creation.
And that was simple. And I thought, well, I've got this wrapped up now. It's all on one sheet of paper. And after speaking with guidance for a while, I kind of came to the conclusion that it needs a little revision.
Thank God for guidance.
That was a good one. I like that. Unfortunately, though, it's going to be switching around on you, because then I asked, well, I can put something else together, and I had absolutely no inspiration to do that. So I said, okay, I'm not going to put anything else together. And I got the message, don't bother. Do not bother to put anything else together. So, and then I woke up this morning, I said, I've still got some time if I want to put something together. And I got the guidance, no, you don't need to. So I got to the house from the condo early, and I watched the football games that I only listened to on the radio, and still asked, should I put something together? No. So I don't know what's going to happen today, I thought, but I didn't feel bad about it, because I figured, well, whatever's supposed to be will be. And then we called Tom and Linda's house, because I thought, well, maybe Tom's supposed to come and it's going to be, his, and I don't have to worry about it. But couldn't reach them. So we're getting to walk out the door, get a phone call, and they just got back, and they're going to show up. So now it's all yours.
I've heard that kind of malarkey before.
Malarkey is a good word.
Yeah. We've had some very interesting conversations with Brother since John has been here. Maybe we would be able to share some of those, since I wasn't told to prepare anything either.
I said to my guidance, well, you're going to tell Tom, right? And the answer, yeah, absolutely. If you weren't listening to your guidance, then how am I listening?
I am not trouble listening to your guidance.
That's where you've been. Talking.
So did you guys bring any notes?
What guys?
This is going to be a fun one.
Talk about feeling dangled.
Ask Brother right now.
Yeah, you can
Just ask him right now
He's
what-
right on.
What is this about today?
What is this about today? He just said John will take over.
That's what my guidance said too.
It's obviously the lessons have been triggers. Each day we start with the lesson, and we get quiet and see where it takes us and what speaks to us. And it's
What was that one that
just
you
one today about forgiveness. Once
came
again,
to you
it's,
in 93?
I'd be interested in other.
Well, I have an area, I don't know if it helps give any ideas in the director's court, but that is being really something I'm working with and trying to really get clear about for myself. And it's under the chapter 6, the lessons of love. It's in the text, page 96, under the section 2, it says the alternative to projection. And the idea out of that that's been really penetrating for me, I have something I'm struggling with in myself, is what you project, you disown, and therefore do not believe it's yours. You are excluding yourself by the very judgment that you are different from the one on whom you project. So that whole, that in particular is super poignant for me, but that whole section is really, I'm just bringing that to the forum because I...
Okay, go ahead.
What do you consider projection to be?
Well, it's when
Maybe we should ask it from a different point of view. What purpose do you think projection serves?
Well, I think it serves what this is basically saying. It's to keep what doesn't feel good to me separate and out there, so that I'm not really looking at it in myself, and it keeps separation going. Yeah,
That's the key. It's the concept, the idea itself of separation. Where would we be if there didn't seem to be somebody else to absorb our projections? Where would we be? What would we be left with?
Guilt and blame and
Our own
Well,
responsibility.
Bottom line, we would be left with the idea that there was only one of us around.
yes.
How are you with that feeling?
Lonesome.
Lonesome? Let's talk then for a minute about separateness, oneness, and separateness. What does the idea of oneness mean? Does that mean that God has one Son? By number or by content? Did you ever think about that? When he talks to us about oneness, is he talking to us numerically? Or is it one Son based upon one Creator? One Creator. Don't everybody answer at once.
Well, is there one creation then as well?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. How many creations are there?
One.
one collective mind.
One collective mind. So we're not talking numerically, are we? When we say God has one Son, we're not talking numerically. We're talking content. So ask the question now from a different perspective. How many gods are there?
One.
One. Numerically or by content?
Content.
By content. If we are all a part of God, we are all a part of God. How many parts are there? It could be one. It could be totally unlimited. It's irrelevant. Are you satisfied with that answer?
Well, we're trying to describe God as one or infinite, to me there is no description that is, I mean, it's the infinite is not describable. So by trying to define God is a waste of effort.
Have you got something there that'll help us?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just checking. Well, I could go places, but I don't know if I want to start doing that yet. But I could just try to summarize some of my thoughts on this. It's easier for me to look at this from the standpoint of a hologram. Again, you take that negative of a picture and you take a little piece off, and if you shine a laser light through at the right angles and everything else, it produces the whole picture again, even though it's just a piece of the negative of the whole picture. We're going to have to, in my mind, move into a more abstract place to understand. And probably the easiest way from here is to look at each of us as a channel to everything.
To what?
A channel.
To everything.
The Course says, Jesus says, I do not choose my channels wrongly. We're each a channel to everything. And so we have the choice of being specific and in consciousness, and then we become small, and we can have the choice of making a body and this and that. The choice is always still there, except we've forgotten we have the choice. So that we have to remember we have the choice. But the fact that we have the spark of life within us, in that section on the spark and the light within us, that's what is the representation of all of it within us. So now it becomes the fact that we've limited our own minds. We become what the Course calls a fragment of our whole selves. But the whole self is still there. We are in time, our whole self is within eternity. That's where you have to make the jump from the levels to go to abstract mind to deal with it.
So what's the difference between specific and abstract? Something seeing different or something seen to be abstract is different how from something seen to be specific.
The abstract doesn't have boundaries.
Pardon me?
I think the abstract doesn't have any boundaries to it.
Specific is differentiated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the abstract includes specifics, but each specific
Does not.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's reminding me a bit of
yeah.
one man whose writings have really been influential in my life is Joel Goldsmith. And I remember somebody went to interview him once, and I was reading this, and she started speaking to him. God, it was amazing. He saw like 90-something people that day, in one day. And he asked her, so what is God and what are you? Something like that, you know. And she started to try
What's
to
the difference
explain.
between God and you?
She started trying to explain. I can't remember his exact question, but she started saying things like, well, I'm a part of God. I'm, you know, things like this. And he said, no. And he said, you are the fullness of God's presence. And that sounds like when I started hearing you talk the holographic, that's what that feels like to me. Like the fullness of the whole deal is there within each of us. And it's just a matter of accessing it consciously, you know.
That's the purpose of a hologram.
Yeah.
So, do you remember more of what Goldsmith said?
That's all I remember from that particular part. That's the part that really struck me.
When he went on to ask her, when you only see yourself as part of God, which part do you see? And which part would we see
All
if we saw a part?
all of it.
There's no part.
Well, it's confusion because it's like, I don't know. I mean, how do you,
Well, I mean, it's not like God's
you
thumb.
can't really
It's-
see a part.
Well,
You
there is
can't,
no-
any direct experience.
There is no part.
Stay with that.
There's no
Any
part.
There
direct
is no
experience
part.
reveals that fullness, so it just doesn't seem,
Yeah.
He tries to part it.
any direct experience I've ever had, and
Yeah.
that there's been no idea of parts. It's not
Right.
even there.
It seems to me that the term part actually obstructs the proper thinking about it. It seems to me that what we're better dealing with is infinite manifestations. And so instead of being a bunch of little things that go out there, it's a kind of a the image that forms in my mind is an infinitely large diamond with an infinite number of facets to it. And so it expresses itself in multitude ways, not expressing itself as a bunch of little separated parts, but as a skeleton.
Something, that's good, Sam. That's very good. If something is whole, how can you know it by its parts?
You can't.
You can't,
No.
because there's no edges around what is whole. So just as you were saying before, there's no way to break that experience apart, to know which part of God you are seeing.
That whole idea of parts of God imply a physicality, and I don't see God that way. I don't see God as a physicality at all.
No, that's the first limitation we have to let go of.
What's that?
That's the first limitation that we have to let go of.
Yeah.
Could you say aspects?
Saying that,
Aspect, to me, aspect is the term that really seems to fit the concept or that we're wrestling with. Because you can think of infinite number of aspects, but it's, well, I don't know.
Put a hand up over here.
I was just remembering two illustrations that Neil Donald Walsh actually gave on like parts of God and God being one. And I can be a very visual person sometimes. So I'm wrestling with this question, kind of how we are now, and I'm trying to imagine this visually. I don't think I don't know if this is the best representation at all, but he held up his hand and he said, well, all of my fingers appear to be, you could say they're separate in a way in that they're individuated, but really it's all part of the same hand, right? I mean, you look down and all the fingers connect, they're the same thing, really, the same tissue and everything, but they appear to be separate. And so that was just a way to that kind of helped me to start integrating the idea into my mind. I'm like, okay, I can kind of see that analogy. And then there was another one where he talked about air in a space. So he was saying, you walk into what you think is the kitchen, and you think that, the air flowing throughout your house, that the air in the kitchen is separate from the air in your bedroom. But really, it's all just the same air, and you're putting names into different areas of it. You think, oh, this is the air in the kitchen, or this is the air over in this space, or this is the air outside and inside. But it's all just the same thing. It's like your thought that makes it separate. It's the idea. It's the idea.
It's even part of the air in the whole world.
The whole world.
The whole-
There's no division between all those sections of air whatsoever. And so I know that's not. I don't know if that's exactly, capturing the abstract mind of God, but it's just something that started to let my mind relax around it and start to kind of see that a
That's
little better.
good. That's very good.
Well, I think spirit is like air. I always use that analogy. I like that one.
Yeah, I
Spirit is
thought,
like air. You can't cut it up into pieces, but you
Yeah.
can put it into containers and call it Tom and Linda if you want to.
yeah,
But it's still the same thing.
You're talking about space. The whole idea of things in space. I mean, if you look up at the sky at night and you just see space, and how expansive that is, and if you realize how vast space is, yet the space between the molecules in an atom, that whole is just as vast. So even this table is spacious. It's not solid. It's really not. So God is everything is things in space. I mean, it's just everything. It's all that is. and to me, so you can't differentiate God, parts of God, or God, He. I mean, it drives me nuts when some, God, He. What is He? It's silly to describe it that way.
Why do you suppose that man has always been trying to describe God? Look back through our earliest writings and you'll find it. It's always been there. Why do we feel a need to define?
Because man wants to understand everything.
We want to know him.
You can't understand.
How would you even have the concept that there was a him?
We want to know ourselves.
There we go. There we go. That's always been our purpose. We've been trying to define and find some kind of a way to think of ourselves that seems to circumvent the boundaries that we have placed upon our world and our sense of self. We somehow know that those boundaries are illicit. They can't be. And yet, they're all self-imposed. Brother says God is, and then we cease to speak. So much for God. Say about yourself. John is, Linda is, Tom is, and then we cease to speak. Is that enough for you?
Putting it in its simplest form. I could
Does
try
that-
to make it complicated if I
Does
wanted
that
to.
satisfy all of the needs you have to investigate who you are?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's when the idea of being, talk about the holy instant in the Course is the same as being present. To me, the best way to even begin to, and I hate to use the word idea, because when I am present, and not even in meditation, but just being aware of who I really am, is the time when I have, if I can try to grasp any, and again, it's a concept, but to try just to have that awareness is the only time that I really feel whole, and have an awareness of the God in me and in everything.
Well,
The transformational creature flying around.
There he is.
trying to get out, but then I know it's down low.
That's a dragonfly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish
Yeah.
you could let him out.
There he goes. Oh, come on.
Please.
Get away.
Seems like he's been out.
I find myself trying to get away from
words. I find myself, when I read, sometimes to be confronted by somebody else's description or idea, and I'm thinking that it has more to do with wanting to be able to experience in myself the presence of God as opposed to, or the Spirit, or there again I'm even running up against words.
Yeah.
But of feeling more that I do have a purpose or an understanding within myself without all these extra words. That, but I'm also depriving myself of maybe reading and looking at more things differently. But nonetheless, there's a sense of peace in not having to be so analytical or word-minded or descriptive in what I'm reading and doing.
Absolutely.
And this is reminding me of when I woke up this morning. I asked Jesus, what would you want me to do today, or what would you have me know today? And the words I got were that every breath I take, Jesus is taking that with me. And I've been thinking about that all day, and it's like it makes me very aware of my breath. That in that breath is such life and such hope and such healing, and that breath is never mine alone. It's the breath of all of us. And I just love that. It just makes me feel so good.
It's very much like we asked Brother this morning what he would have us do. And he said, why don't you ask instead what you would have God do? In other words, instead of saying, what do you want me to do? Then what do you want God to do?
That's in Walsh's books, where God says, command me to do what you want me to do.
Show me my function.
What's your answer?
Well, my answer a couple of weeks ago was very definitely, in spite of a lot of misgivings I had about the past or my thoughts or all these things that have gone on, the answer I got was, in spite of all that, my function is to extend God's love. And I try to think of that frequently. Since then, I thought, instead of doing this or that or the other thing, or feeling like I've got to go out and build Habitat for Humanity houses or go to Kenya and do something wonderful. I at my age, I'm not doing that, but I can do that one thing.
Yes.
I can extend God's love, and I try to keep that in mind.
And that's more valuable than building all the houses and or doing anything.
It's so comforting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What else would you have God do?
Wake me up.
Yeah.
Did you say lift?
Wake me up.
So there's some part of you that at this point is missing something.
Seems like it, yeah. course tells me that's not true. And I'm not missing anything.
So did you have more of that conversation this morning?
About
With
what to ask God to
Uh-huh.
do. We were all, I think, a little bit dumbfounded. To really, I don't think we followed through on that, did we? Do you remember a question?
I just keep coming back to help me to love myself. Help me to see clearly and love myself. And there's a sense, I started doing some mirror work with a book from Louise Hay, and it's incredible. You know, I can't believe how much tears come up every time I sit in front of that mirror and start looking myself in the eyes and telling myself, you know, I love you, Nicole.
Yeah.
I really, really love you. It's okay, honey. You know, and just, it's like, wow. And then I find myself starting to apologize for being away for so long. Like I haven't been there for her. You know, been off in this and this or whatever. And so that's kind of my living prayer right now. It's just help me see deeper, because then it's like falling in love with myself, and there's a couple other situations that come up that I need to deal with revolving other people, and I'm seeing them differently. The whole energy just softens. Like there's a softening and an opening, and it's whatever's seen there, whatever comes up it's okay. You know, it's okay, and it's there to be loved. That's the whole purpose of the exercise. And it's a rare thing to see myself in that light. You know, and I see mirrors differently now. I'm thinking I need more mirrors.
Let's all just take a moment and ask ourselves what we would like to have this next moment be. What would we like to have it be? Of anything that we could hope for and wish. What do we want from this next moment?
Always illumination for me. I don't think that response would ever change.
Illumination.
Yeah, to know.
To know.
Yeah. Real knowledge.
What do you need to know, Sam?
True nature of God, true nature of myself.
Why?
Because I feel incomplete and ignorant.
And why do you feel that way? Something tells you, while you do feel that way, something tells you that it's not the truth, or you wouldn't continue to ask.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, it's kind of like bumping up against barriers of knowledge, and I don't like it.
Well, you're already. Everybody in this room is already complete. They just don't know it.
Yeah, that's right. Now
You're talking about
I want to stop the not knowing. See?
loving yourself.
Yeah.
Who is yourself?
Brother tells us that every moment, every single moment, is complete and filled with happiness.
Yeah.
Every moment. And what keeps us from experiencing that?
Our judgments.
Ignorance.
Separation.
Our judgments.
Yeah.
Our ideas.
Our judgments about what, Jim?
About what's wrong. If it weren't for, and then you fill in the blank, because, we all probably have different judgments.
And how do we get over that?
What's that?
How do we get over that? If that's just part of our story, what do we do to get over that?
By staying present, but not having anything to do with the past or future.
Hmm?
and realize that even the present isn't real, but that's the best we can do here and now.
What keeps the present from being real?
Our conception of it.
Our idea about it.
Yeah, conception. A concept.
Perception.
I want God to possess my mind and give up the idea of separation.
And if I were to tell you that God does possess your mind,
Yeah.
that the idea of separation isn't real, then where do you go?
You let go.
Let go of ideas about anything.
Nowhere to go.
Well, if you could just
There's
decide
no other
to
moment.
be happy without any reason for being happy. If you could just say, okay, I'm happy, and mean it.
But you see, there's every reason to
Yeah,
be happy.
yes, but that's where you, in order to get there, you first have to experience happiness. It's almost like unconditional happiness, which is an interesting concept. But what that means is everything's perfect. I don't need to fix anybody, anywhere, anytime, anyhow.
Anytime, and you can't.
Yeah.
Not only don't you want to, you can't.
Yeah.
There's two ways of being unhappy. One is getting what you want, or one is not getting what you want, and the other thing is getting what you want. Anytime you want anything, you're going to be unhappy because you either got it or you don't, and eventually it's going to be gone anyway.
It's kind of interesting that there's, in the introduction of the manual, there's kind of a deal that speaks directly to this. There are only two thought systems, and you demonstrate that you believe one or the other is true all the time.
And what are they, Sam?
Well, I guess I would sort of answer that.
Separation.
Is that being illumined and not illumined, being in a separated mind state. Being in a separated mind state is one thought process, and the other one is being in an illumined mind state. And I feel stuck in one. Yeah.
Let me suggest that the two he speaks of, let me suggest to you that the two he speaks of are, one is being with God consciously, and the other is believing that there is a way not to be with God consciously.
Of the separate idea, the idea that you are separate.
What if it's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
the idea that there can be another
Yes.
thought system or another
Yes.
whatever, another anything.
Isn't that
Which
a
is the ego's thought system. That's the ego's thought system,
Yeah.
that we could be separate. I'm sorry, Sally, go ahead.
Isn't it a matter of choice? We know that they're there, that they're our whole lives we've been taught about the whole separation area, but when we've learned that there is another way, isn't there just a choice? We can choose one or the other, and we're free at any time to do that. As I see it, I get caught up in separation, but then I can occasionally remember, I hope more than not, that there's a better way. And
Okay,
it's a
now I'm going
choice.
to ask us to do one more thing. Ask yourself simply this: do I want to feel separate from God, or do I want to feel at one with God and with everyone else?
Because we get what we want, right?
There is nothing else. Can you feel that? Can you feel your mind resisting that.
I think that's oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that's what was so beautiful for me this morning was that vision of
Identity.
of breathing, of Jesus taking this breath, and as he took this breath, I took it as well, that we took it as one. And it was just so peaceful and so, I don't know, it felt so good.
What made it feel good, Danny?
That's when I really felt I was joined with Jesus, and there was no separation. That with every breath we all take, we are taking that breath together. That's not a separate breath. It's all, we're all doing it together. I don't know, I'm still processing it.
Do you feel resistance to your desire?
Do I what?
Feel a resistance to your desire to be separate or to be connected to Jesus or anyone else?
I don't know if I feel a resistance. I feel that it's something that is hard to do. Can I really make that happen? Is that possible? And then it's like that it is possible. It can happen in an instant, but I'm resisting it.
It's interesting that there's one thing I read not too long ago that really hit me, is that when, and this has to do with presence and not thinking, and it's a meditative state. I mean, we don't have to sit in meditation to be in a meditative state. It's like if we can sense the presence of the I am, which is God, the God self, the Course calls it, within my being, in the background of my life at all times, then it's easier to perceive or look and just look and listen and be aware of who is the I that is, I don't like to call it, you say perceiving, but aware of all that is, which is no separation, no concepts, just all-inclusive. And then it's easier to look at things and say, well, again, who is looking? Is it my ego or my true self, the I am, behind everything? That's behind everything that is. So when we talk about these concepts of myself, my ego, or this table, or someone else, if we can look at that as who is seeing, having that in the background at all times, that's a constant meditation. It's the constant awareness. And there's no, to me, having come from a situation that was earlier, stressful and full of self, full of the false self, coming from that to this point is becoming so joyful that I can't, it's just, wow, all this reading, and I read stuff till I'm blue in the face, and it all comes down to that. Who is looking? Who is seeing? Is it my ego or is it my true being? To just be every moment is to me, that's it. Everything else is just words and thinking and just lip service.
So is it true or isn't it that we always have exactly what we want?
Yeah. If we know
I think
how,
so.
if we know how to access it.
Or should we better say, is it true that we always think we have what we want? By the same logic, I could say to you, okay, if you always have what you want, and you seem to be separate from God, then do you want to be separate from God? And that doesn't play very well, does it?
No.
I think it has to be there, though.
Pardon me?
It has to be there, though,
It
somewhere.
has to be there for the ego.
I mean, I think that wanting is there, or the experience wouldn't be there. The wanting to be separate. As much as my ego might want to say, no, I don't want that. It must be somewhere.
I don't want
And it feels
that.
like it must be a grievance with life somehow, like some.
I don't want that because I'm enlightened and I know all this stuff.
Yeah, it occurred to me when you asked that last question, I was just reveling, before that I was just reveling in the feeling that I had. And then when I was asked to try and explain, it was like my mind, I can't even remember the question now, it's like my mind got all mixed up and chaotic, and so it's like, no, I just want to remember the feeling. I don't want to explain it at all. I just want to
Right.
remember the feeling.
Get away from words.
That's
Yeah.
what struck me about what you were saying was when you were talking about, myself, or the one we think is the good one and the one we think is the ego. And you're saying to always ask, is this my ego self or the God self or what have you? And who's the one asking that question? Right, and keep like turning it back on that.
That's exactly right. That's what we do instead of looking at ourselves, is turning that around and looking at
But then your mind, of course, goes like, and you turn it back on that. Well, then you start thinking about who's watching that and that and that, and it goes. And you imagine this infinite regression or whatever. But that's really just the same. It's the same thing, no matter what level you can see. You can imagine all these levels. It's just the same. It's still the thought. Same concept. I feel like trying to. It's just like has to just stop. Like trying to conceive of that duality at all is like takes you out of.
We're trying to.
It's hard to put into words.
Trying to experience God from a mindset that is outside of God.
Right.
And
yeah.
thinking we can accomplish it.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep talking.
That's what this whole thing is really about. In fact, Neil Donald Walsh's books, he talks about that. I wanted to experience myself. Well, how do you look at yourself from within yourself and get the totality of yourself? I don't know from that perspective. But if you want to try, see, this is why I think the entire course is a journey. It starts out talking about man and the creation of man and Adam fell asleep and everything else, and it moves past that and beyond that. It's the idea of, if we're going to have a God that wants to experience itself, and I would have to use the words a son of God who wants to experience itself, then the idea of breaking itself into a whole bunch of pieces to look at it from every angle starts to make sense. Except each piece can't see very much.
Yeah.
And it has to not have its memory if it's going to remain a piece. Otherwise, it immediately goes back to the whole thing.
That's why we've got the prodigal son, isn't it?
That's why we have all of them.
Yeah.
And that's what the Course talks about when all abilities are shared, when the atonement is complete. It's an experiential process of God, or the Son of God, experiencing itself from every possible or within reason aspect, because it's not infinite. It's not infinite fragments here. Because if it was, it would be the possibility that some fragment couldn't come back from infinity. It's a finite amount of fragments of God that represents a big enough sample size to get a picture. And everyone thinks it's being crucified. And everyone is resurrected into God. And it's each of these, when they're all come together, that I look at as the feast. When every character in the play wakes up to the actor playing it, and they share this. And that becomes an abstract visual or mental or godly joining, understanding, whatever you want to call it, of God. A beingness is the best way I could put it. The beingness is represented by every one of these points of view that realizes at some point it is a channel to the whole thing. That every aspect of life is a channel to all of life.
So when we ask the question, fundamentally, what is the difference between the ego and God? The answer would have to be none.
Nothing.
There is no difference.
Unless you go into the ego's mind, which thinks it's limited.
But
Well,
there isn't another mind. There's only the mind.
But in
of God.
reality, there's
But
nothing
there is
else.
illusion.
There's no ego even in reality.
Say it again.
I said, in reality, there's no ego. There's no two.
Right.
That's right.
There's just one.
But
That's right.
But that doesn't help us in the illusion. Because for us, there still is an illusion.
Seems to be.
Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists.
Sure it was.
So how does that make us all
Peace
feel?
of God.
Peaceful.
Good.
I feel a little bit better now. I was having a hard day. I feel a little bit
So if there
better.
is no difference between God and the ego, what is the basis for our judgments?
I can't go there.
What is the basis for our feeling bad?
Fear.
Fear.
Feels like
The only
fear.
thing that we're trying
God.
to correct is our perception, true?
Yeah.
Our perception is all there is to correct. So why worry about it?
Don't worry, be happy. It's, I love that.
Somebody ought to write a song with that.
Could you, if you adopted this attitude, could you simply be loving?
Sure.
Simply be what?
Loving.
Absolutely.
If there was no reason that you found to be unloving, could you simply be loving? So what we're trying to do then is come to the awareness that the only thing we're trying to change is our perception. That there's something wrong. Our perception that there's something wrong.
Which is the same as the judgment.
Which is exactly the same as the judgment. Will you find it any easier to stop judging if you come to judging through this awareness? Okay. So if you want to feel bad, go ahead and feel bad. It's okay. And if you don't want to feel bad, then don't feel bad. That's okay too.
Kind of makes feeling bad be silly, doesn't it?
Waste of time.
Tremendous waste of time and energy.
Here on page 10 is something you can easily flip to. Spirit is in a state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit. Therefore, you are in a state of grace forever.
Amen.
Amen. That's it.
Let's go
All
home.
this other stuff is stories we're telling ourselves.
It's like God saying,
Yeah.
I want to know God. And as soon as you said that, then
you start going outside of God. Just as if a person says, I want to know myself, there's automatically the assumption that person doesn't know itself.
yeah,
And it is outside of itself.
and that's the one idea.
I think your intention is very beautiful and very clear, and you're going to find what you want regardless of how you describe it. I really trust that in your sincerity.
Thank you.
So God is the ego, huh?
Yep.
That's a tough one.
So truth and illusion are the same thing then.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes. In the highest...
Golly, I've been on the wrong
Yeah.
track.
Because if there's
In
something,
reality, which is the purest level of truth, yes.
because if there's something that's,
Can't be two.
yeah, if there's something that's not true, then
If the
nothing is
reality
true.
of my being is that I am spirit, and spirit is in a great state of grace forever, then how do I rectify not being in a state of grace?
By thinking you are your body. That's how you do it.
Imagination.
No?
So we're back to what we started with.
Yeah.
The only thing to change is my perception.
Yep.
Yep.
It's interesting here, it says, how else can you find joy in a joyless place except by realizing that you are not there? You cannot be anywhere God did not put you. And God created you as part of Him.
What page is that?
97 in the text.
Yeah.
That is both where you are and what you are. It is completely unalterable.
It isn't the
It's
ego.
just shifts in awareness.
Oh,
It's just shifts
Yeah.
in
I
awareness.
like that.
Yes.
It's not just an awareness until we accept it.
Yes.
I find that if every so often I don't rein myself in and remind myself that I'm chasing a rainbow, then I've gotten off track. I've come to believe that my search is valid. And instead of recognizing there's nothing to search for.
So I think the ego and God being the same, you were saying, it seems to me the ego is a mistaken idea in the mind of God. Because I understand there is only God, there is only one mind.
Okay, Kat.
What happened to Cat Shoes?
That's about the size. About the size of the whole situation right there. Sorry.
Disappeared. You replace my baby brother.
It's all God.
So there is only one mind, the mind of God.
Anything needed.
And the idea of a separate being that's created and split in that mind, and that's the ego mind. So it seems to me that that is God, all right, but it's a mistaken idea in the mind of God.
Is there a split mind?
Yeah,
Is there a split mind?
yes.
No, there
No.
isn't.
The split mind is the idea that
That's
there's
an
a split
idea.
mind.
It doesn't really exist.
It
That's a
doesn't-
mistaken perception.
It is not real, and therefore, it does not exist.
But the ego is real.
The first paragraph right here, it says it cannot be so.
Well, you said God and ego are the same thing. Is God real? That's what I meant.
Yeah, so the ego is real.
Yeah.
Maybe neither of them are real.
So we just made a loop that doesn't connect here.
Tell us how.
Well, of course, in a lot of places it says truth is truth and true is nothing else is true.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
illusion is illusion. And if
Yes.
you're saying they're both the same thing, then there's no reason for this.
It's true. If you're resting with that clarity, like the Christ side, there isn't any reason for any of this, and that is where truth is. That is reality.
Is
So
God love?
it's just in.
What did you say?
Is God love?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you are, he is.
God is.
So does love include all the illusions? And so is this world real? And all the things that seem to be happening in this world, are they all real?
Or are none of them real?
The key, the
If
word,
none are real, they're illusions.
yeah, when you say seem to happen, that's where you get a little confused. It seems like there's a war.
Seems like.
It seems like there's death and destruction. It seems. What's going on? Nothing. If we get that nothing, in other words, all there is perfection. And we get it or we disagree with it. We disagree with perfection.
It's interesting because it's so many words and so many concepts. For me, or for not for me, but in this situation, it seems a lot more complicated than it really needs to be. It's really simple.
Words are
And it-
real short of truth.
And nowhere have I ever even begun to think that I'm awakened or even near there, but there has got to be there are ways to rise above the dream or in the dream. I mean, we're learning how to escape the dream, but we're having to do it in the dream. And everyone has their own process of doing that. No two people are going to get there the same way.
If every moment is filled with joy, then what keeps me from experiencing that joy in every moment?
Bingo. Nothing. Well, there's a lot of things that keep us from it, but
Judgment.
It's the idea that it's just the idea that there's something not to be joyous about. That there could be something else.
every idea.
Like he's saying, we're having to do this within the dream. It's the idea that we're within the dream that is having us try to get free from within the dream.
Sure.
What would happen to our thinking if we began all of our thought processes with the idea, there's nothing wrong with me, or you, or you? What would happen with my thinking
It would relax.
if I
Would
began?
There'd be no
completely relax, and we couldn't be projecting anything to be existing there. So
Why think?
Thinking, that's thinking, like you said, thinking is the problem.
all of thinking is sizing up life.
Yeah.
And so if we're not
Anytime we have
sizing
a
up-
thought, it creates our world. So without thought, there is no world. And that's simple, but it's not easy.
To me, the difficult thing isn't the thought. The difficult thing is to believe the thought or not believe
And
the
that's
thought.
another thought.
That's
Hanging
the
on.
tricky wicket.
Yeah.
That's a tricky thought.
Yeah.
That's the thought that gets you.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd like to get back to Tom G's thought, though, because that was the question that didn't get answered.
What is it?
What is it?
When Tom was saying, Tom C. said, illusion and truth are the same because there's no separation. Then you said, how can that be if only truth is real?
Right.
And then we got into,
That's
where,
that is saying only truth is real. By saying they're the same is
Yeah.
the statement that they are, that there's only truth is real.
It seems to me like illusion, it's almost like it just gets absolved in the light of truth. It just gets absolved, like it just isn't there anymore. But it's not like it dies or something, it just isn't, it melts right into that oneness.
Because
The way everything does. So it's like
Yeah.
everything is there. We want to say, oh, God doesn't have pain or this or that. Well, it's like everything there. I mean, I'm just reflecting on experiences of oneness that I've experienced directly, and that's what it felt like to me. It wasn't like everything was gone, and yet it was full. I don't know how else to describe.
You might
Like
say,
everything.
you might say illusion is a misperception. In other
And
words,
that's what Tom
well,
was saying is our perception
yeah,
is the illusion.
it's seeing, but it's not seeing what's really there. It's seeing what's in my mind rather than what's out there, if there's a difference.
if
Yeah, see,
It's conditioned.
what I kind of wrestle with or bump up against is that if you have an experience of illusion, is the experience itself not real? I don't know with that.
if truth and illusion are the
Yeah.
same, if truth and illusion are the same or one or whatever, where does that leave truth and illusion?
Exactly.
Where's the and?
Why
It's a
would we be
paradox.
talking about it?
Why would we
It's
be
a
talking?
it's a
Why is it
paradox.
differentiated in this book? Can we go to a place in the book, Tom?
Could I just say one thing about that before you do?
Sure.
And that is in lesson 2. I've given everything I see the meaning that it has for me. And if I'm giving all of these separate things meaning for me, then I'm forgetting that I could look at truth and give that all the meaning it has for me. And that's the only way that I can see what you're talking about. If I choose to give to the truth or the Spirit or to God or to love or all of the fruits of the Spirit, the meaning that it has for me, then I've just left all the others out.
If I can decide what truth is in my mind, then I can make my illusion real. I can make my world real and it becomes truth. If truth and illusion are the same thing, then any world I see through my perception is truth for you.
Through your perception.
For you. Well, that's where we are now.
Yeah.
But that's what this course is trying to tell us. There is a world beyond that that is true, and that isn't. Let's if we can, let's go to page in the text 236.
36.
Patty, it's just, let's read this introduction. It's about a page and a quarter here. 236. There's 4 paragraphs here. It's called The Guiltless World, chapter 13.
You want me to just read the whole thing?
Yeah, why don't you just read the whole thing?
Okay. The guiltless world. If you did not feel guilty, you could not attack, for condemnation is the root of attack. It is the judgment of one mind by another as unworthy of love and deserving of punishment. But herein lies the slit. For the mind that judges perceives itself as separate from the mind being judged, believing that by punishing another it will escape punishment. All this is but the delusional attempt of the mind to deny itself and escape the penalty of denial. It is not an attempt to relinquish denial, but to hold on to it, for it is guilt that has obscured the Father to you, and it is guilt that has driven you insane. The acceptance of guilt into the mind of God's Son was the beginning of the separation, as the acceptance of the atonement is its end. The world you see is the delusional system of those made mad by guilt. Look carefully at this world, and you will realize that this is so. For this world is the symbol of punishment, and all the laws that seem to govern it are the laws of death. Children are born into it through pain and in pain. Their growth is attended by suffering, and they learn of sorrow and separation and death. Their minds seem to be trapped in their brain, and its powers to decline if their bodies are hurt. They seem to love, yet they desert and are deserted. They appear to lose what they love, perhaps the most insane belief of all. And their bodies wither and gasp and are laid in the ground and are no more. Not one of them but has thought that God is cruel. If this were the real world, God would be cruel. For no father could subject his children to this as the price of salvation and be loving. Love does not kill to save. If it did, attack would be salvation, and this is the ego's interpretation, not God's. Only the world of guilt could demand this, for only the guilty could conceive of it. Adam's sin could have touched no one, and had he not believed it was the Father who drove him out of paradise. For in that belief, the knowledge of the Father was lost, since only those who do not understand him could believe it. This world is a picture of the crucifixion of God's Son, and until you realize that God's Son cannot be crucified, this is the world you will see. Yet you will not realize this until you accept the eternal fact that God's Son is not guilty. He deserves only love because he has given only love. He cannot be condemned because he has never condemned. The atonement is the final lesson he need learn, for it teaches him that, never having sinned, he has no need of salvation.
Hallelujah. There it is.
Yes.
This is the ego's
I like that.
interpretation, not God's. That sounds like God and the ego are not the same.
What do you mean?
That's
It's
the
the
ego
ego's
right there.
interpretation.
Pardon?
The atonement
That's
is
the
the
ego right
final
there.
lesson he need learn, for it teaches him that never having sinned, he has
He
no
has
need
no
of
need of
salvation.
The ego is the thought that
That's
God
the
needs
truth.
that he needs salvation and has sinned. That the ego is that belief that is the opposite of that.
But we have heard it said here that illusion and truth are the same. This doesn't sound like the world I see
It's
and the
not,
real world are the same.
It's not.
It's not, it's not
it's
the
not
world.
that illusion and truth are the same. It's that when you consider truth, there is no illusion.
Well, I understand
It
that.
disappears.
I understand that. I've always understood that for years now. The point is, in understanding illusions don't exist in reality, does not make my world in the illusion real, though. Is all I'm trying to say.
Say that again.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I'm
that
not
again. I
grasping
didn't
you
quite.
there.
When we're in reality, understanding that illusions don't exist, that does not apply to when I am in the illusion in my mind and saying that my world is real. Because then I'm trying to bring it to truth, I'm trying to bring the darkness to the light and trying to make the darkness true.
Can you change your mind?
I hope so. Because I want to be out of this illusion.
then you're
But I
the
don't
first
want
one.
to carry this carnage with me and call it truth and the same as truth.
Trying to bring the darkness to the light, I feel is a great thing.
Yeah, because
I'm sorry,
When
I was
there's
trying to
light-
bring
when there's
the
light
light to
shined on
the
it,
darkness
it's
and
not
make the
darkness
darkness
anymore.
truth.
uh,
That I misspoke, thank you. What I'm trying to do is say the darkness is the light. And that's what this is saying it isn't. Or God would be cruel.
right.
Yeah, otherwise, what's the point of studying all this? if it's all the same.
Because your mind finally pops.
Well, yeah,
Just
but
get,
that,
you know,
It's like saying you can...
it's such a paradox, and you can never make one side of a paradox just be the only way that it is.
It's like saying that part of the whole that thinks it's a part is truth, when only the whole
No.
is truth.
No, that's not what he was saying, though. That's not what I heard. I heard that
But it did
from
sound
the
like
seed
that.
of truth, there's nothing else in existence. There's just truth.
Yes, I'm 100% with that.
That's all that's being said. Yeah.
But that's different
So
than
that has
saying
to be-
there's no difference between truth and illusion, and there's no difference between God and our egos.
In truth, there's no difference.
Because one doesn't exist. And I understand that.
So that-
But
but
we're talking about things that we believe do exist. We're just trying to make a distinction between truth and illusion. That's the only purpose of the Holy Spirit, is to separate truth from illusion so we live only in truth. So I don't know how that makes sense to say truth and illusion are the same thing.
That's not what I said.
Would you help me understand?
No, what was just said is what I at least intended to say, is that in the truth there is no illusion.
Right.
Then where do we have a misunderstanding?
I guess, because I heard truth and illusion are the same, and I heard
Oh, I
the
didn't-
ego and God are the
I
same.
did hear him say the same. I heard him say something
Ego,
else.
if there is only God, then God and the ego are the same.
It's all God, then ego's in there, then...
Even-
So the illusion is, the ego isn't an illusion then.
Well, one way I feel it even is like, this is a little bit different, but have you ever had an experience, and you probably have, everyone here probably has, where you're so kind of deep in a situation that's egoic, you know, you're feeling pain or whatever's going on, and out of that situation, or maybe the other person you're dealing with or whatever, suddenly it all opens up, and it's so clear. It's so clear that other is not even an other, it's yourself.
So you're no longer in the ego at that moment.
There's the oneness, and that the whole time through that situation, love even is there. And what I was projecting was an ugly thing or whatever was going on was there trying to bring me home. Even there.
If love is there at that level, the ego isn't.
Right.
So you can say, well, then the ego doesn't exist.
Love was never non-existent, though. See, it's just that there
we're
was
talking about
there's a blindness.
in your mind.
There's a blindness then, right?
This is turned into a word game.
It's a blindness.
I've said this before, but I'll say it again. In Latin, ego means I am, for what that's worth. But that in Latin is what it means. I am. So maybe this ego that we're talking about is me separate from the world, me separate from everybody because I am. And if I look at it that way, then I don't see any problem with what I'm reading.
But that's confusing to me between that I am, the ego I am, versus the I am that I am.
The real I am.
Yeah.
And what makes it different?
Yeah, what makes it?
Because the I am, the ego is my story, which is keeping me from waking up. All the aggregates, everything that I have encountered from the time I was a baby till now is what I struggle with, and it keeps me from waking up. There needs to be a differentiation between that I am and the I am that I am. To be aware of the true...
Maybe that's the problem, is that there seems to be a distinction.
Definitely. Definitely. There's got to be, otherwise why did I reincarnate to learn my lessons if there isn't a purpose in all this? I mean, we all go through it, and we're here to get out of it. And if we say everything is the same, it ain't going to happen. I don't think. I mean, I can't do it that way. My ego can't. Whoever's in charge at the time ain't going to get it done if I'm saying everything's the same.
Are we here to get out of it, or are we here to love it like it is? That's the question I ask myself.
Well, that's the door.
What does the
That's the
Course-
doorway.
What does the Course
That's the
tell us is
doorway
our...
Pardon?
to one.
What does the Course tell us is the goal of our studying? Isn't it to see differently?
Sure.
To remove the blocks that we have created, that I have created, to the direct experience
The
of
awareness
love's
of love's
presence.
presence.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing. I mean, to me, there's a whole
But it's
lot more.
always here.
There's a whole lot more to it than that.
I think it comes down to the same thing rephrased in a million different ways.
Yeah.
So that our sensitive ego minds will finally buy it in some form or another, and it's all just the same thing. And it's just being said again.
A zillion different
Yeah,
ways.
yeah, and that's the only issue that I sometimes have with the Course is just so verbose that it gets confusing. To me, there are much simpler ways of seeing the truth. And again, I've been through the Course 3 times now, and I have the same issue every time, and I'm trying to get past that. But like today, we're so many words, and it's just come around and around and around, and we have differences of opinion. And so not everyone's going to wake up the same way, or I don't know.
I'd like to read one more paragraph, and it's in chapter 28. And it's
Page what?
Page 589. It's a short paragraph.
Page 581?
589.
589, okay.
And it's chapter Undoing of Fear and the Present Memory. The miracle does nothing. All it does is to undo, and thus it cancels out the interference to what has been done. It does not add, but merely takes away. And what it takes away is long since gone, but being kept in memory appears to have immediate effects. This world was over long ago. The thoughts that made it are no longer in the mind that thought of them and loved them for a little while. A miracle but shows the past is gone, and what has truly gone has no effects. Remembering a cause can but produce illusions of its presence, not effects. My ego, in my mind, is part of that past that's over. And I can't reconcile that my ego and God are the same thing. Or else God is over.
Tom, I see your ego is different from my ego, because my ego is built on the, I mean, if you're, with your definition of ego from the Latin, my ego has been built on all the perceptions of things that have happened throughout my life. And yours are completely different from mine. But in truth, if we can get past that, we are within that oneness of thought and well, I think of the fruits of the Spirit, where we all join. But I don't see the ego as being an all-encompassing thing, where all of our egos are the same.
I don't, they can't be. They're designed not to be the same.
Yeah. And therein lies the separation.
It's interesting, kind of along that line, is that on page 550, God gave the teacher to replace the one you made. So the Holy Spirit is a replacement for ego, which would then, in effect, kind of deny that the ego is really there.
I think so, yeah.
The problem I have with, the struggle that I have with the book is that every paragraph to me is actually inexplicable, because it tries to explain something, but it never explains it all. And so it's kind of like, okay, I kind of get that, but the truth is beneath it or more profound than what I'm reading.
Yes. It will always be that way, though, because words can't do it.
Words can't capture.
Words
Can't do it.
We can't
Yeah,
capture
can't do
that
it.
way.
But your mind is sort of saying, well, the reading can't do it, but I can go there somehow.
You can directly experience.
I can go there.
What I
Yeah.
hear you saying is that love has no opposite. And it's all inclusive. And I can understand that. But what this is telling us is that we can think love has an opposite, and that's called illusion.
That's called the what?
Illusion.
The illusion, yes.
But it is not God. But the way I see illusion encompassed by, in the introduction it says the opposite to love is fear. But what is all encompassing can have no opposite. And therefore, it goes into the famous, only love exists, whatever doesn't exist type of thing. What we're looking at is keeping an illusion in my mind, and still having it encompassed by every illusion is a crucifixion, like we just read, and every resurrection is a rebirth. That's the encompassment. But it doesn't mean that the crucifixion and the resurrection are identical. One brings the other. Illusion brings truth. It doesn't mean illusion is truth in my mind. And so if we're just talking about semantics, maybe that's all it is.
I think it is semantics now. I think we've lost the... I don't know if we've lost anything. I just think it's semantics.
Well, being wrapped up in that keeps us even from then the opportunity of the direct experience.
Right.
I'd like just to read a few sentences here, and it's from page 236. It said, "This world is a picture of the crucifixion of God's Son. And until you realize God's Son cannot be crucified, this is the picture for the world you will see. Yet you will not realize this until you accept the eternal fact that God's Son is not guilty. He deserves only love because he has been given only love. He cannot be condemned because he never was condemned. Atonement is the final lesson he need learn, for it teaches that never having sinned, he has no need of salvation."
No need for forgiveness if there's never been a sin. Yeah.
Yeah.